With the next market review about to kick off, the stakes could not be higher for not just the companies involved in the great rollout of fibre, but for the whole economy, for its productivity, and for the prospect of getting out of the economic growth rut that we've become so accustomed to. So the stakes are extremely high, and it's going to be really important to make sure that all views are properly heard and that what emerges is not just a messy compromise, but something that fundamentally puts the industry on a stable long-term path into the next decade and beyond. Now, while it's tempting to get into the nitty-gritty of the details, and it's incredibly important to be clear what it is precisely that the various parties want, the starting point is actually far back from that. It's to sort out what the prize would be if we got this right. What exactly is it that we want, and why is the existing structure and the existing regulatory approach not fit for the purposes of delivering that prize? After all, if existing institutions and rules are working fine, then why bother to do anything? Why not just have a slight tilt of the tiller, but carry on business as usual for the next decade and more? Now, it's pretty obvious that what we've got in the UK sort of worked whilst cost of capital was very low and whilst the industry was in its infancy. But what we put together is a really soggy compromise between two broad approaches that could have been and could be taken. The first thing that could have been done to achieve the prize of a really well functioning fibre, broadband and retail broadband market is to say, well, we'll do it like it was done in the post-war period. We'll have a monopoly and we'll rely on that monopoly to do a planned solution for the British economy. That would have been BT in some form, and it would have relied upon that monopoly being efficient and delivering what's required and being able to raise the money. There are good reasons for not going down that monopoly route, and those reasons are particularly pressing now that the market has matured somewhat. The alternative was to go for full infrastructure competition, to go for a model in which we relied upon market forces, and the market forces would determine who the winners and losers would be, and the race would be set in place. Now, there's a lot to be said for infrastructure competition, but as with the monopoly model, you have to be very careful to make sure that you've actually structured the market and the institutions to make that infrastructure competition deliver. What we've got in the UK is a soggy compromise between the two. And it's absolutely critical in looking at the market reform and market review and the reforms that might come with it, in looking at the frame of that and looking at how that might be influenced, to be clear just what that soggy compromise has left us with and why it will not deliver what's required into the medium term. It's neither a monopoly nor a properly competitive infrastructure market. It relies on the idea that there's a core dominant player with market power as established by Ofcom, and that's Openreach. And basically, there's that kind of sense in the background, well, Openreach will do the job, but, we'll just have some competition to try and keep it honest and put pressure on it to deliver in a more efficient fashion. It's not pure infrastructure competition because that would require clear specification of the rules a genuine level playing field and proper enforcement to ensure that no player, and in particular not Openreach and BT, abused the market power that they so obviously have. It would require separating retail markets from genuine infrastructure investment, and it would require a clear and transparent reporting of information and progress and so on and so forth. Now, that's not what we have. And the last market review produced this 3-category set of tiers in which it was assumed that essentially high urban density areas would be a free-for-all, but that other areas would have a degree of regulation and there'd be a final quasi-monopoly or quasi-franchise solution for the so-called hard-to-reach areas. Think what all this has been delivering, and think why it really hasn't done either what the monopoly model could have done or the full infrastructure competition model could achieve. At the core is BT, and BT has an extremely checkered financial performance going back now a number of years. It is a vertically integrated and partially horizontally integrated business. It has been described as Openreach plus a large pension deficit, and it has always been strapped for cash and found the raising of investment funds constrained by its overall pension liabilities and broader financial structures. In any world, BT would struggle to deliver through itself and through Openreach what a modern industrial high performance service-based economy would require. But BT's made it worse, because BT's forays into broadcasting and a whole host of other activities, consultancy, international services and so on, have been one litany of investments which have disappointed the investors. Sports rights is just another. And given that legacy, it's automatically going to be the case that the shareholders are going to look to try to harvest what has been invested in its gem, which is Openreach, and hence the moves now to reduce costs through the workforce and to perhaps go slow on the last mile and the last customers. Now, this isn't surprising. Almost all incumbent telecoms businesses in Europe have run into difficulties, and into the US, and the transition from copper wire and the conventional telephone through to the modern communications world has been very hard for any and all of them to navigate through. But what should have made a difference was a proper regulatory structure and a properly regulatory body that paid attention to what's been going on. And for all the successes of Ofcom in a variety of areas, this has not been its brightest spot. It is unclear as to whether what it really wants is monopoly with a bit of competition, or it seriously wants infrastructure competition. It's unclear whether what it thinks should be done is what government policy has been trying to point towards. And it is clear that being stuck in the soggy middle between these two different models has left it somewhat adrift, to say it in its kindest ways. Ofcom's priority are no longer fibre rollout and retail broadband competition. They're all about the online safety bill and the host of other things which are coming Ofcom's way. It really has to do so many different things now that it's a question of whether there's a blinking moment when the eyes blink and a bit of attention is paid to what's going on in this broadband fibre market, as opposed to the full glare of the wide open eyes to the coming issues of privacy, online safety, and all that kind of thing. It's not fit for purpose. It's not so much that it has failed in what particular people have done. It's just not got the laser focus on making sure this works. And the result is that all sorts of things come up which have Ofcom on the back foot and then struggling to work out what to do between its models. Equinox is an example, but there are plenty others. And of course, what it hasn't paid attention to is the fact that as the fibre frameworks are put in place, then the game changes from investment in the infrastructure itself to harvesting the returns through retail broadband competition. And of course, it is part of the strategy, as the outgoing head of BT once said, to basically establish a degree of dominance in these new markets and then harvest the proceeds. That's the bid and the offer to investors. Now, Ofcom should be neutral about that, but what it should do is focus on rules, enforcement and regulation of this market. Competition doesn't happen in some kind of vacuum. It happens because there are clear rules. You know, the stock market isn't an incredibly capitalistic and competitive market because it takes a laissez-faire approach. Who can trade, what they can trade, what information has to be made public, what the accounts have to be, etc., etc. These are all regulatory rules which enable people to enter the market with confidence. So my take on the next market review is that it now really is a choice between the two models. And if Ofcom genuinely believes that a dominant open reach is the route to the future, then it has to be split out of BT, it has to be a standalone business, and it has to be an open access business where everyone and anyone can access its infrastructure and where the products themselves are separated from that infrastructure. That's one possible model. If, on the other hand, it believes in infrastructure competition and wants to go down that route more substantively, then it has to take investors seriously. It has to recognise that you can't promise investors one thing and then fiddle with the regulatory rules to knock out what were reasonable expectations of investors going forward. You have to ensure that the UK as a whole is an open and welcoming world for foreign investors. And let's face it, they're mostly foreign investors, not a world in which there are ex post adjustments. So what I would urge is that in thinking about taking the market review forward, what those who want infrastructure competition to be the continuing model should do is to clearly engage in exactly how that level playing field should be established, what the rules really ought to be to prevent market abuse, and what the institutional focus of that must be. Might be a specialist, distinct unit within Ofcom. It might be time for breaking up Ofcom and separating this out. But the status quo is going to leave the UK in the slow lane, and it's going to have effects not only on this market and ultimately on customers who are going to have to pay for the inefficiencies that might result, but it's going to continue to weigh down on productivity and the future prospects of the economy as a whole. That prize, that impact on the economy as a whole, is what should be front and centre of the next market review. Thank you very much.